morning. This is the first of 8 messages called 8 Characteristics of Life, where I'm going to talk about what science says are the 8 characteristics of living things and try to find those in our spiritual life. So, number 1, life is made of units and cells. That is, no large living thing can be made without small living things. First of all, we see in the earliest expressions of humanity the family. We see Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, eventually Seth, and whomever is not precisely identified in those stories, because Cain had a wife, Seth had a wife, and so they're not given names, they're not given specific stories, but I mean, we're still at a group of people that is extended family size, multi-generational family size, that would have been the majority of people's interaction. The church, if you can call it retroactively the church, that is, the people of God separated unto himself in the Old Testament before the coming of Jesus. I think they are not what they would not call themselves the church, but if they're believers on Jesus before he comes, then they're a part of that larger thing. But we see a real expansion of size while the Israelites are in captivity in Egypt, and Moses leads them out into freedom. And Moses then has an interaction, a series of interactions. He has a father-in-law whose name is Jethro, the prophet of Midian, who gets to see Moses' interaction with the people of Israel after the deliverance, and then has some wise old man input. But Moses sets himself up to be available to all the people of Israel. And as a result, because he thinks that's what leaders do, he presents himself for all their needs. And I'm imagining a tent in the desert that is operating like a small office, where you would go to receive pastoral counseling, or perhaps another kind of counseling. And it says that he kept his door open and was doing that from sunrise to sunset. That's a minimum of 12 hours, and we can presume 100+ weather in the dry, sandy desert. And he was willing. Now we're going to find out he was willing to do the wrong thing, but he was willing, and far be it for me to judge someone for being willing. Where there is unwillingness, there is often want, there is often lack. His father-in-law has a very interesting observation, and the phrasing is peculiar. What are you doing to them, and why are they all standing around you? What are you doing to them, and why are they all standing around you? Now, that's an interesting phrase, because if anything, from our modern victim perspective, we go, well, they were taking advantage of him. Well, yes, but he set out the doormat to allow himself to be utilized. And then finally, why are they all standing around you? Now, Jethro, the prophet of Midian, is a man with many flocks, and his name actually means his abundance or God's abundance. So while we associate Jethro with a modern hillbilly themed television program, the name Jethro would have meant, God bless me with a lot of stuff, And therefore, God also blessed me with the wisdom to manage it, to manage stuff and property and people. What a blessing for Moses to have that kind of father-in-law. And he says, essentially, we're going to have to alter how this works. You can't let these people all be able to come to you for every toothache, every cold, every stubbed toe, every hurt feeling. And we're going to rearrange this numerically into groups. And the base number becomes something like 10. So that every group of people had a sort of underleader over them who they'd bring their smaller needs to. And that eventually bigger needs would make their way to Moses. On a historical note in America, we currently have a very high security White House, and it would be virtually impossible for me to go in and knock on the door and just kind of drop in on the President of the United States. But you probably know that until the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, we had no Secret Service. It was created after realizing, oh, maybe it's not a good idea to have everyone have public access to the leader of our country. But there was, for many presidents before him, a big open lawn and a door. And you could walk up and knock, and you could drop in on the president. It took about 100 years of American history to discover that that was not the most ideal method of doing things. Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, already knew this. He said, the way it needs to work is that you need to have a small group of people telling you the biggest issues. And then trust people. Trust leaders that you've appointed, that the people have appointed, to deal with. These people need prayer. These people are getting underserved in the food distribution. As I mentioned before, the cold, the hurt feelings, the stubbed toe, whatever their issue might be. The primary responsibility, well, there's maybe two, but I'd say of the two primary responsibilities of a spiritual leader, the first one is to be available to God. Amen? The first one is to be someone who has made their time and their ears and their mind available in an undistracted fashion. Because what was the main thing that distinguished Moses' life from other people's? Well, God chose to talk to him when he was alone in the back of the desert. That becomes the ignition and beginning of the relationship of God and Moses. That is spiritual, that leads to leadership. Now, secondly, as a byproduct of that relationship, God directed him, and God used him to lead a group of people out. So those are the two huge things that he needs to be able to do. And Moses thought, well, I guess since I'm the leader, I have to respond to these needs. You may be able to infer from reading about him that he was not the most gifted or equipped to deal with people and their day-to-day wants. Is that a fair statement about our brother Moses? Because he was not wired to be the man that responded well to complaints. Fair? I hope that's fair. Now, what Jethro was giving him was the benefit of the wisdom, the abundance of wisdom God had given him for managing people, for managing resources. And what that was going to do is enable Moses to give his life to some very important things. Big things in the kingdom. His family, because if you read the qualifications of an elder that are given to us in the New Testament, you see that ruling your own house well is a criteria for leadership in the house of God. Even if he would not have had the New Testament referred to, I believe the character and intent and expectations of God are the same. That a man who leads God's people shouldn't neglect his family, even for the noble cause of attending to God's people. And his own, as I said before, his own relationship with God. That is, I believe it's possible to be so popular and so drawn into service to the church that it can eclipse your own relationship with God. Moses was, I hope this is fair to say, a very emotional man. The solution to those things is a deeper relationship with God, to have our heart transformed to be more like the heart of God, and to bring those emotional needs to God, because friends are good, family is good, the church is good, but at the end of the day, if my emotions are out of control, I can't blame anybody. I can't say that person pushed my buttons. I can't say that person whined and complained too much. That particular person who I thought I was doing something nice for, who had all these complaints about how I did it. Ultimately, what I need is to bring those things to God. So that's Moses, and the word being used there for these groups of 10 is Esser. Now to fast forward to 2nd chapter of Acts, talks about the church meeting in the temple and in house to house. Now, it doesn't specifically mention the number 10. But what is kind of interesting is that, if you imagine, now, I'm not an expert on house sizes, but you know, what a gathering in your home might look like. Well, first of all, gathering in your home might be your family. Family might be 4 or 5 people, okay? Or if you have 2 families in your house. An extended family, like perhaps that Adam and Eve would have lived in, with in their land or whatever area they would have been described as living in. Or, you know, if there's 2 or 3 families from your church in your neighborhood, and you rotate around, but Tuesday night, those 2 or 3 families are at family A's home. And they have a meal, and they have communion, and they talk about the Word of God, and tell some jokes, and they sing some songs, and, then Thursday night, it's over at family B's house. Imagine the number of people you could get around a large dinner table. With a leaf in it, the section you put in, you pull the table apart, you put the leaf in, you get this bigger, like Thanksgiving, Christmas extended family dinner table. I've seen 8 to 12 people around one of those, and you see yourself naturally falling into that Esser, into that group of 10, as if just as the intentions of Jethro were to kind of bring down human needs out of the giant crowd size into 10 people caring for each other, with a leader, with some kind of person or people seeing themselves as the overseers, maybe the heads of those families. And then, if you take what Moses had said, those people pray for each other. Those people look out for each other's needs. Those people, someone says, I got my hours cut at work and I'm short on groceries, and people go, oh, you know what, I have dried beans, I have a loaf of bread. Or even better than that, I have a tree I need trimmed. And I was thinking I was going to have to put out an ad, but you know what, I'd much rather give that $50 to a member of the house of God if they want to jump on the tree with the saw and chop up, the extraneous branches of my flowering mulberry. So, I believe I've demonstrated that just as in physical life, in the spiritual life intended by God, life is made of units and cells, that you cannot make big living things out of small living things. You cannot make big living things without building them with small living things. Thank you. In Jesus' name.